Welcome back. In this video, we are going to look at some of the most disturbing posts from all over Reddit. As always, a special thanks goes out to our channel members, but you can also help support the channel by simply subscribing and leaving a like. Before we begin, I want to give you a warning that some of these posts are very dark and disturbing, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. Now that that's out the way, let's dive in. Our first post was posted onto the r/relationship advice sub on December 30th in 2019 by a 19-year-old Redditor using a throwaway account, and it goes like this. My dad has an obsession with buying exotic or illegal animal meat, and is why my family fell apart. So my dad has always been a kind of strange guy, but I never really noticed. I was used to it, and that's just who he is. He isn't mean, but doesn't talk much. Very busy with work, and doesn't seem to be interested in anyone's life. That kind of thing. When I was a kid, gradually our relatives stopped visiting. My dad wasn't in contact with his family, but my mom's used to be around a lot. Then they just stopped. I remember hearing my mom fighting with her parents a couple of times. I gathered that they didn't like my dad. I haven't seen my cousins in years, and we used to be close as kids. I was never one for social media, but recently reactivated my Facebook and decided to look up some of my relatives on a whim. I messaged the cousin I was closest to. She's 18 years old. Also, my aunt, her mom, who's 40 years old. My cousin didn't seem to know why we hadn't seen each other, but my aunt said I should ask my mom, that it wasn't the sort of thing I should hear from her. Mind you, I'd asked my mom before a few times. She only said they were too busy to visit. I was really confused, and we ended up having a long conversation yesterday. I had to insist on the real answer. Now, I am horrified at what I found out. Her family is freaked out by my dad because a few years ago when they came for dinner, they found out what he said was beef was actually kangaroo meat. My mom had specifically gone out of her way to make the meal herself because she knew my dad had done this before, so she banned him from cooking, but he secretly swapped the meats during some point she wasn't in the kitchen. She admitted to her family he was constantly doing this to us. Yeah, I know. I've eaten tons of gross shit he said was beef or chicken, and whenever I didn't like something, it's probably because it wasn't what he said. She told me he's been obsessed with trying exotic meat for years. Now looking back, I remember times I saw weird unlabeled meat packages in the basement freezer. I just never thought to inspect it. She said he has spent thousands and thousands of dollars getting them. They are rare and cost a lot, plus travel costs, and paying off his contacts to pass off information about where he can find whatever he's looking for. It's driven my parents to the verge of financial ruin multiple times. My mom also said they've nearly divorced a few times. I used to hear them fighting sometimes as a kid. Now I guess I know why. You're probably thinking he just has adventurous tastes, and this can't be that bad, so I'll give the full picture of everything she told me. Some of the things he's had are weird to standard Americans, but I realized might not be that weird in other places. The kangaroo and horse meat, for example. Wolf, camel, shark fin soup. Some is questionable, I guess, such as something called ortolan bunting. Look it up. And seafood eaten while still alive. Then some of it is straight up illegal. Like she said once he'd killed and ate a bald eagle. He hunts normal game, which I knew, but also protected species. He's obtained bushmeat, meat from African wildlife that's illegally imported here. This includes stuff like rats, various monkeys, chimpanzees, apes and gorillas, pangolin, porcupine, civets, and giraffe. From what my mom knows, he bought these from some markets in New York City that sold it in immigrant communities. But it became even worse with other exotic animals. He has gone so far as to travel to other countries specifically to hunt/get meat from particular animals. These have included zebra, cheetah, elephant, hippo, Bengal tiger, and endangered rhino. In places like Southeast Asia and Africa, he went somewhere in the Caribbean to hunt and eat dolphin. Brazil for anaconda. My mom said that a trip he's going on next month to China is specifically to try and find a way of eating Chinese salamander and panda meat. These are both very endangered species. It's seriously illegal there to kill pandas. That's not something Chinese people actually eat, but he's determined to do it. And he's been like that about some of the other ones I mentioned, that are also rare or under protected status like some of the gorillas and orangutans. Who hears of an endangered animal and thinks, aha, I want to eat that? What the fuck? Oh, and he also wants to go to the Antarctic to hunt penguin and whatever else is there before the ice melts. He's already been to the Arctic and eaten stuff there apparently. My mom has to snoop on his laptop to keep an eye on what he's doing since he stopped talking about it. He knows she doesn't approve, but she can't do anything. They just pretend it's not happening, and she reads his emails with contacts whenever he mentions needing to go on a trip for work. She says it sounds like these people are involved in foreign animal trade networks. He's very secretive. She has to deliberately wait for the minute he's in the bathroom with the computer logged in. She has been terrified for years that any day he's going to get arrested. They, my mom and younger siblings, rely on my dad's salary. My mom's disabled with a chronic illness and cannot work, so would only have disability checks to get by on. There's more she didn't even tell me because it wasn't appropriate, and refused when I said I could handle it, so I can only imagine what else he's done. I don't know what to do. My family is on the brink of falling apart and I never knew. I will never look at my dad the same again. This is really disgusting to me. My mom can't divorce him because they rely on him. She won't talk to her family about it because they'll just tell her to divorce. I know she's very anxious, but I feel like I've almost lost respect for her because she knew the whole time and never at least warned me. I'm also pretty sure she has lied to me saying we never had a cat when I was little, except I remember it and don't remember what happened to it, which now I'm sick, thinking maybe my dad did something. My mom insisted I was thinking of someone else's cat, but there is a photo of me as a little girl with that cat on my bed. I'm in college on the other side of the country and only home for a few more days. My mom made me promise never to say a word to my dad. He'd kill me. This is all so fucked up to me. I'm really worried about them and what they'll do if he's caught. Also, what the fuck is wrong with him? What can I do? Should I confront him or try to convince my mom to leave? Get her family involved? It's like disarming a bomb. I don't want to do anything that would just blow everything up, but I cannot imagine him just getting to continue doing whatever he wants. After reading this, my first thought, and I'm sure some of yours as well, was if the OP's dad had ever consumed human meat. Their mother mentioned that there were things she did not feel appropriate enough to mention to the OP, even though they insisted. So one can easily speculate that the OP's father has, or has at least thought about eating human meat. The OP's father has already allegedly consumed different primate species, and one might say the humans are not that far off. There is also the swapping of the meat to the OP's family members, tricking them by lying about what it really is, a behavior similar to that of the serial killer, Joe Metheny, who fed unsuspecting people burgers that contained bits of human meat from the victims of his killings. This is the kind of psychological game that gives the person doing the feeding a mental win over those who are unknowingly eating something they normally would be repulsed by. Whether this is for humor or some sick sense of control, I don't know. But the OP's father is clearly obsessed with this, to the point of losing his entire family. A Redditor named Womp Womp Rats would also comment this: "Your dad seems mentally ill, not because of the weird meat, but because of the fucked up behavior around it. There are people who basically collect exotic meats or other foods by eating them, the same way others collect countries by visiting them. It can be an expensive pursuit, but he's pursuing it more like an addiction than a hobby, to the point of self-destruction. And the part where he tries to make the family complicit by sneaking rat meat into your burgers, that's a straight up fetish. I'm gonna guess getting him into psychotherapy is probably a no-go, but he needs it." That's a good point, that it could just be a thing about novel experiences, but the illegal part is what gets to me. It's not illegal to travel or try a bunch of food in restaurants. He's eating and sometimes killing species he's not supposed to, and buying some of the meat on the black market, or bringing it in himself. That part is really crazy to me. And yeah, I'm seriously sickened by the thought of what I might have eaten, because of him. I wanted to help my mom, but I also hate that she let this go on. I feel like I can't trust either of them now. She didn't mention anything about therapy. I couldn't bring it up without him knowing I know, and my mom said I can't do that. She implied he could become violent? I don't know exactly, but it freaked me out. I tried to look at the OP's profile to see if there was any more information about their father, but at the time they were suspended. Though seeing as how their account was a throwaway, and the post was made over 4 years ago, it's likely that there were no more posts. If the OP is being truthful about their father could face serious jail time and penalties of up to $250,000 US. And that's not even mentioning the potential health risks. You see, bushmeat is highly prone to containing diseases due to the minimal processing it goes through. Because of this, Ebola outbreaks are common in areas that handle bushmeat, and that is why any importation of bushmeat is banned. If the OP's father were to consume contaminated meat, then he could be risking his life, the life of his family, and potentially others. And if the OP's father continues to chase this exotic meat obsession, who's to say that this chase won't lead him down the road of cannibalism? And then comes the question of how he would acquire this meat. Hopefully, the OP and their family have or will soon be able to get away from their father before his behavior catches up to him. Our second post actually made it onto the news and is the story of the Canadian couple Agar Hassan and his partner Melinda Vasilie. On April 28th in 2018, Agar and Melinda got into an argument leading to the death of Melinda. Her cause of death was multiple stab wounds. But what made this case even more chilling is that after Melinda's death, Agar would take to Reddit under the username RedAsBlue101 and would tell the story to the internet, claiming this was an act of self-defense. Wanted for Kitchener murder, my side. I understand the early judgments made by society. Distancing myself makes it seem like I am trying to escape a crime. I'm not. I'm only trying to give myself some space and fully take in what happened before I turn myself in. The fact is, no one is more destroyed than I am. She was more than a girlfriend, and soon to be fiancé. She was my everything. What happened that night was nothing but tragic. Looking back, we've been in a relationship for a year and 3 months. This was the first serious long-term relationship for both of us, so everything we did was a new experience. We traveled the world, our families met, had fights and made up, talked seriously about marriage and kids, the whole deal. I would never physically hurt her, in any way. She would occasionally hit or slap me when I said something stupid, but I'd laugh it off. She met all my friends and family. Wherever I went, she was there. She would come to my house from Kitchener every week, starting Fridays, and would stay for 3 or 4 days. We were incredibly used to each other. The last month of our relationship, I started asking her to give me some more space so I can work on my job, and she started coming over less and less like I asked. During March, her friend Anna got pregnant. Melinda and Anna then moved in together because Anna has a big family and wanted privacy in case she keeps the baby. I never met any of Melinda's friends at this stage. 1.2 years in, she told me all of her friends only use her. That part was incredibly clear to me. They would only contact her if they needed their hair done or had boyfriend problems, including Anna. 1.3 years in, Melinda and I got into an argument via text and our relationship ended. I went to her apartment that day to try and talk. Every time I tried breaking up with her, she would call my mom or drive down to my house, so this time, I figured I'd do the same. Upon arrival, I was confronted by Anna's brother and her boyfriend. A physical altercation took place, and the police were involved. At this stage, I knew if we were to patch things up, it would be rough, so we didn't see each other for a few weeks. Later on in April, Melinda and I started texting each other again. We agreed to see each other and talk on April 29th. She was originally supposed to drive down to my house, but felt sick, so I told her I would come, and she agreed. Melinda told me Anna and her boyfriend were present, because the incident from before might make things awkward. I didn't mind. Upon arrival, it was just Melinda. She said Anna went to drop Christina off at the club, Melinda's sister. She invited me to her room right away. We cuddled and talked. We never spent so much time away from each other. We just cuddled, kissed, and talked about everything. A while later, Anna came back with another friend. She asked Melinda if everything was okay, and Melinda said yes. Anna will attest to this if she is honest. We continued to talk and finally decided it was worth it to try one more time. However, Melinda didn't want anyone to know, especially her family. She said after the police were involved in a physical altercation with Anna's brother and boyfriend, things wouldn't be right if they knew right away. I agreed we would keep it on the down low until things cooled down. We continued to talk, and Anna and her other friend left the house to grab food. We both let everything out and our relationship was back on track. As I'm getting ready to leave, she asks me if I've done anything with any other girls while we were on break, or any time we were on break. I told her we needed to be honest, and said yes, and told her about it. She started freaking out, wouldn't say a word and just kept slapping me with tears in her eyes. Slaps turned into hits. I told her I was sorry and if she didn't stop, I'd do something. But she didn't stop. I then stupidly pushed her away, harder than I expected, and she fell against the sink. This was the first time I ever did something physically violent towards her. I told her I was sorry, and she said, "Leave. Leave now." I began saying sorry even more and asked if I could get a hug, but she was still crying. I go up to her to try to give her a hug, and almost out of nowhere she grabs a knife by the sink. Initially, I thought she was just going to hold it and try to tell me to leave, but she doesn't. She comes at me in full force, aiming towards my face, and I just tell her to stop, but she doesn't. I tried grabbing the knife but ended up cutting my hands. After a few cuts, I lost it. I freaked out. I was scared and in a state of shock. Never in 100 years did I think she would use a knife against me. Out of shock and fear, I grabbed one, and I hit her with it, almost blindly a few times. I didn't know what happened. I was confused, shocked, and scared. I had no intentions of that happening. When I left, I honestly just thought she passed out. Then I looked at the blood and started freaking out and just ran. I didn't know for sure she had died until the next day. I honestly had no intentions of ever doing that to her. I was protecting myself. She was with me the most. We were each other's best friends. She would tell me everything. Her deepest secrets that not even her friends or family knows. The amount of regret and sadness is beyond words. Everyone else is just reading or talking about it. I lived it. I was there. I did it. Every waking second I relive that moment. At this stage, life is really not worth it for me. Although it was out of shock and protection, I should have just accepted getting hit. Maybe I would have lived. Maybe not. Anything is better than living with this. I'm reading the news and they are claiming it was targeted, or an act of terrorism. Why would I buy her roses that night if I was planning on killing her? I didn't even go home that night. I always have a passport in the car and decided to just get away for a few days before turning myself in, or offing myself. If any of it was planned, I would have taken my stuff. I would have took cash. I'm in the United States with $200, no clean clothes, nothing. I didn't intend on any of it. It was out of fear and protecting myself alongside shock. I'm sorry to everyone, especially Melinda's family. I know it will not be accepted, but no, I didn't mean for anything bad to happen that night when I went there. Rest in peace, my beautiful. I hope you forgive me in the afterlife. Pictures of our last text convo, and pictures of us as a couple. Some people think I was a complete stranger and just killed her. Augur would include this image of the two of them, as well as screenshots of their last conversation via text. Okay, I'm just driving home. When you're up, let me know if tonight is for sure or not. Just woke up, not feeling any better. I know what will make you feel better. I'll be there by 11:03, 11:06. You can't help. We shall see. Anyways, I'm gonna get ready. I want to run it by Anna first, so she doesn't freak out. She's not home yet, though. Okay, LOL. Tell her it's a guy who looks like me. I kinda lost weight. LOL. When will you be here? I'm gonna leave my house in like 15. KK, hurry. Will Anna be there? Yes. She's with Byron in her room. I'm driving now. As we read in Augur's post, he fled to the United States, and he would not be taken into custody until July 11th, a little over 2 months after he took Melinda's life. This would take place in San Antonio, Texas, and his sentencing would not come until mid-2023, where he was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 16 years, making him potentially eligible in 2033. Despite Augur's testimony in court and his Reddit posts where he claimed this was not intentional, the prosecution argued that Augur had gone into a frenzy and even pointed out that Augur had texted Melinda's phone after the incident occurred, stating that it was nice seeing her. Leading up to the murder, Augur had also sent Melinda over 60 messages during the period they were broken up. and Melinda had agreed to meet up with him to give their relationship its closure. The surveillance footage of that night showed Auger and Melinda standing outside by Auger's car before giving each other a, quote, lingering kiss, which after they separate, Melinda goes inside, but sometime later, Auger heads back in her direction. One more thing that the prosecution pointed out was that Melinda had been wounded by 2 knives, and this would indicate an intent to kill, because if Auger was only trying to defend himself from her attack, then there would be no need for a second knife. The prosecution would label Auger as an obsessive and jealous ex-boyfriend. In the end, only Auger knows what truly happened that day. I will say that reading the messages, it's very clear that Melinda intended to meet up with him that night. Though this could have just been Melinda being kind to her ex, as many people are. She could have been under the impression that everything was okay, and that after this encounter, the two would go on their separate ways. But maybe Auger couldn't handle that, and after attempting to get her back and failing, he lost control, then tried to cover up his tracks by posting his side on Reddit. Before we get into our final posts, I would like to give another warning because this story contains mentions of SA and taking one's life. So, I'll give you one more chance to click away before we get into it. The final post is over 11 years old and was posted onto the r/offmychest subreddit on July 20th in 2013 by a Redditor with the name Captain_1958. It goes like this. I am not proud of my son. This Saturday, my son will have been sober for 18 months. He got his GED this year, and he starts at community college at the end of August. He finally has a job that I didn't get for him. Soon, he will be moving into his own apartment, and he hasn't missed a single appointment with his therapist. He has done everything you would expect of a precocious 17-year-old who hit a rough patch after meeting with a particularly bad influence. He is 29. This is the point where I'm supposed to say that nevertheless, I'm so proud of him for turning his life around, getting off drugs and off the streets, staying out of trouble, and acting like a responsible adult, or at least an adult who knows the meaning of responsible. Maybe I'll throw in a reference to the prodigal son and kill a fatted calf for him. That's certainly what's expected of me. That's certainly what my son expects of me. He wants and demands praise and forgiveness, and a party, and me to hug him and tell him it's all right. Demands me to tell him how proud I am that he made something of himself. But I'm not, because he hasn't. Not in the slightest. His mother and I gave him every opportunity we could. I didn't expect any praise for that, because unlike my son, I don't expect praise for doing what you're supposed to. She and I worked hard to give him a loving, stable, comfortable, and supportive home. We were involved in his school. We introduced him to music, to the extent that any two people can. His mother was a damn good cellist though. And sports, and culture. We fed him healthy meals. We played with him. Thanks to him, we got in the best shape we'd ever been since our 20s. And we'd let him stumble and fall, and make mistakes and get back up again. He started shoplifting at 15. The first time we caught him, we bloody dragged him back to the store and made him return the copy of Grand Theft Auto and apologized, and offered to pay for any damages. The second time we caught him, this time with a pair of shoes, we did the same thing. The third time, we started going to family therapy. Therapy seemed to go well, and after a few sessions, the therapist asked for a few one-on-one meetings with him. After 2 of those, the police came knocking on our door because the little shit had concocted some story about how we were a religious cult who raped him for breakfast every Saturday. And the dumb little chicken shit therapist actually believed him. Rational heads prevailed. We fired that therapist, and he went through 6 more in many months, until we couldn't find anyone who would take him as a patient. By 16, he was drinking. Then we found pot in his bedroom and our bedroom. He started leaving needles, bongs, and crack pipes where he knew we'd eventually find them, just to fuck with us. I know this because he said so, in those exact words. He had his first intervention and first trip to rehab that year, and his first relapse. He had to repeat a year of high school at 17, which meant he was now the ringleader of a group of other young dipshits who saw him as this totemic mentor shaman who could hook them up with whatever shit they wanted. I'm also damn sure he started sleeping with one of the gang's younger sisters around them. but had nothing to go on by my own instincts. So all I could do was tell her parents to keep an eye on her. No charges were ever pressed, and the family never spoke to me again after that, but they did pull both of their kids out of that school, and my son was furious at me for daring to not let him continue committing statutory. He decided to try for normal later on. While I was away, he spent an uncharacteristic night at home and on his best behavior. After his mom went to sleep, he followed her to her bedroom. He took a knife with him. He crept into the room, straddled her, and put the knife blade up to her throat, then slid his other hand and stabbed her. I don't know exactly what happened next. I know he held her down and tried to undress her. I know she fought, and I know he stabbed her. I know she got away and locked herself in the bathroom before he could catch her. I hope that means she kicked him good in the balls. I know she broke the window and screamed for help. And I know he ran. I know she was lucky the ambulance got to her before she bled to death. And I know he called his friends to brag and beg for a ride. I also know that the police caught him. I know if I'd been home, or if I'd caught him, I'd have killed him with my bare hands. The state tried my son as an adult. He pled out, but only after making his mother testify and smiling the whole time. She divorced me a month after his sentencing. I looked too much like him. Then, she killed herself a year later. I would be a liar if I said I didn't blame him for her death, because I absolutely do. He was sober when she went to her room, sober when he pulled out his knife, sober when he climbed on top of her, sober when he raped her, sober when he stabbed her, sober when he ran, sober when he called his friends to brag, and sober when the police found him. When I made the mistake of visiting him after the divorce, he laughed and said she had had enough of his dick that I could never satisfy her. When I made the mistake of visiting after she killed herself, he laughed again and asked how it felt to have some prick take your bitch away. I should have killed him right there. It is to my eternal shame that I did not. They let him out after serving 3 years. He spent the next 6 years on the streets, in and out of rehab, on and off other people's couches, and would grace me every 6 months or so with a phone call demanding money. Eventually, I refused to talk to him unless it was to drive him back to rehab, and I stopped completely after he stole my wallet. 2 years ago, he came to my house with his aunt in tow and crocodile tears in his eyes. He pretended to apologize, but I slammed the door. His aunt barges in to try to shame me into forgiving the man who raped my wife, caused her death, and laughed about it. He stayed outside. He slashed my tires, threw a brick through the window, and drove off in her car. His aunt had no idea that he'd taken the keys, or that he'd been armed this whole time, but she blamed me. He guilted her into letting him stay with her, went to rehab and relapsed, then went again, and here we are. In stark contrast to the ball of shit that is my son and his life, I have watched my friends' and colleagues' children go on to become doctors, lawyers, skilled tradesmen, actors and musicians, academics, entrepreneurs, and career military. I have seen a few start their own families, and even those who have had a rough start, or who stumbled and fell, managed to pick themselves up again, or are bravely soldiering on. I have nothing but respect for them. I also note that they do not expect juice and a fucking cookie for having a job, and not getting hopped up on meth, or raping their mothers for 18 whole months. My son has pretended to reform before. He has even convinced himself once or twice, but he always backslides, always relapses, always finds new ways to disappoint, always hurts other people for his own short-sighted benefit. His aunt is already at that stage where she is pretending she must have forgotten, where she put some knick-knack or a piece of jewelry, and has already told me to fuck off after I warned her what my son can, will, and has done before, and what he will do again if he thinks she is weak. When he fucks up again, when he hurts someone else with his ceaseless bullshit, I will not be there to pick up after him. I'm through with him. I'm through with his aunt. I cannot talk to her without being overcome with rage and shame as I see the stupid hope I used to have that my son would ever amount to anything. And I do not need any more disappointment and failure in my life. I am not proud of my son, and I'm sorry for inflicting him upon the world. That was the only post the OP would ever upload onto Reddit, and they would also never reply to any commenters. Whoever the OP is, I hope that they know that this is not their fault, and that sometimes people are just who they are, despite their upbringing. If this story is true, it is very similar to the Omen movie, where the family is plagued by their evil son who turns out to be the Antichrist, though in the movie, Damien, the son, is adopted and has supernatural powers. But one can't help but compare the evil and coldness that the OP son displayed to that of a demon. That wraps up this episode. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.